Welcome everybody to our beginning of the Christmas season here at One Life. And I know for some of you, this is your time of year. You absolutely love it, can't get enough of it. I know others of you, it's a time of great stress and you're just kind of worried about how many gifts you have to buy. And I know for others, it's kind of a painful time just because it reminds you of relational issues or whatever it may be. But what if, no matter where we fell on that line, there was a way to add a dimension to our understanding of Christmas that really and truly just enhanced its meaning no matter what? I think that's actually possible, and that's going to be our goal this whole month of December. And I think it's possible because of one passage in particular that we're going to make our home base throughout this entire month, where we're going to stand and we're going to look at the traditional Christmas story and all that, but we're going to stand on this passage because it's written by the author who wrote where Joseph and Mary go into Bethlehem and there's no room for them in the inn, and there's the manger and the shepherds and the angels and all that. The same author that wrote that story wrote these words that I'm about to read, and there's a few critical concepts in this passage that I want you to get down and listen very carefully to. It's found in Luke chapter 1, beginning at verse 1. Many, he says, have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. With this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus. Now, a little side note there, Theophilus, there's a couple of theories about who he may be. He may be a governor or a dignitary of some sort that he's writing the story of Jesus to, or he is the one that provided the funding behind writing the book. They don't really know for sure. Those are the theories. But then he ends this way: so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. Three concepts in there I want us to get, and I want us to get all month. Eyewitnesses, carefully investigated, and certainty. Eyewitnesses, carefully investigated, and certainty. Here's why. Christmas is an awesome time of the year. I had a very idyllic childhood when it comes to Christmas, and have enjoyed that with my own kids. I have a lot of great Christmas memory. I remember I was delivering papers. I had a paper route when I was a kid. I don't even know if they do those anymore. But around Christmas, that was the time when you went to collect the bill from people. They'd give their $5 for their newspaper or whatever, and then they'd be like, "Here's a 20, kid, and here's some cookies, here's some candy, Merry Christmas." People just are that way. It's just a great time of the year. There's a lot of generosity, a lot of great memories associated for a lot of people, right? And I think the reason is because it's rooted in two stories in our culture: the story of Kris Kringle, right? And then the story of Jesus and Mary and the baby and the manger and the angels and everything. And it's something about that kind of puts this light on it that makes it the kind of thing that really draws out sort of the best in us. But here's the problem with it, is that first story, the Kris Kringle one, right? It starts with once upon a time. But I would maintain that even unconsciously, maybe no one would come out and say this, it's for many of us, the second story, we begin it once upon a time. And what I mean by that is, it sounds kind of mythical. It's a great story. We think it's very quaint, it's very good, it's religious, it's all that stuff, but it's still a once upon a time story. And what I wanted you to see is that the author doesn't begin it that way. He begins it by eyewitnesses, carefully investigated, and being certain of these things, that they're actually real. And one of the reasons I say that whole package is because, one example, there's a movie called Polar Express, one of the great Christmas movies now. It's one of the more different Christmas stories now, but it's nice, it's good, it's an animated thing. Tom Hanks does a bunch of stuff in it, and loved watching it. But at the same time, the message of that film is it's really about your belief, not the truth of the things themselves. And the Bible's the exact opposite. It's like, no, the things are true themselves, and whether you believe it or not doesn't change the truth. And so I think the spirit of Christmas, like reflected in a Polar Express, is we kind of emphasize the belief and not so much the truth. And the Bible would do the opposite. It emphasizes the truth, and it calls on you to do belief. So that's what we're going to be searching out as we're kind of exploring the reality of Christmas. Now, we're going to go about this a few ways. First of all, we're going to focus on some places these things took place in historical, geographical locations. And they know a lot about these places from ancient documents, from archaeological finds, and things like that. Now, before you panic, for some of you who don't like history or any of that kind of stuff, we're going to focus on people. Because I think the people, this cast of characters that show up in these stories that we're kind of familiar with, they kind of taken on sort of a stained glass window effect. And I love stained glass windows, but too often they're just religious symbols. In other words, the cast of characters become these unreal types that we just associate with Bible and religion, and they're not true to life as we really experience it. And what I want to do is zoom in and show that these are real human beings with feelings and experiences just like you and I. And then finally, I want to note that you'll see real encounters with God. We'll get to learn how God really does interact with people in the real world. Now, the way we're going to go about this throughout the whole month is we've borrowed the concept Advent. It's been going on for about a millennia and a half in a lot of traditional churches and things, and the idea is great. It's saying that Advent means there's a dignitary, there's an important person coming, and we're getting ready for his or her arrival, right? And so they took that and named that with Christmas. This year, Christmas Eve falls on a Sunday, and so that we can build some anticipation and get ready for things. So we want to get ready in a couple of ways. Now, first, just the services, but what I'm going to ask everybody to do is we're going to study Luke chapter 1 and Luke chapter 2. Luke chapter 2 is where the traditional Christmas story is. We're going to back up and we're going to do what Luke does and we're going to lead up to it. So study and read Luke chapter 1. Now, guys, I think you have a fantastic opportunity because many of you or your young families, your kids are anticipating Christmas. They can't wait. You could start today and just read like 5 verses a day in the book of Luke, starting in chapter 1. Read that to your kids, and by the time you get through December, you will have gone through both chapters. Now, in addition to that, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a gift. Hopefully, this is your first gift of the Christmas season. Everybody gets a gift. Adults, students, doesn't matter. We're going to give you a book, and it's called The Case for Christmas. Now, you remember that line that Luke used? I've carefully investigated. There was a man who was Yale educated, and he was an investigative reporter for the Chicago Tribune years ago. And his wife starts going to church, and she starts believing this stuff. She becomes a Christian. Well, he's an atheist, and he hated that idea. He was like, I'm going to be married to some religious fanatic, right? So he decided to use his investigative skills as a reporter to prove the Christian message wrong. And in his investigation, he had just the opposite happen, and he became a believer as well. And he's written a lot of books about his search, and this is one of them. And it's actually just packaged as kind of almost like a small introduction, but a really good one using a Christmas angle. And it's Lee Strobel's his name, and he's just using stories about his investigation to go after this whole thing about the reality of Christmas. And so my challenge to you as well is that you'll take the time over December, and you can do it about 3 pages. This is a small book, less than 100 pages. You guys can do this. It's very accessible. I know of a middle schooler who's already read the thing, okay? So we can do this. But my challenge to you is to read it. Because I'm going to say this. We say we believe we can bring our brains to church, right? I believe for Christian people, what's in that book is the bare minimum standard that we all ought to know when it comes to these things, because our culture has just given the Christian message a beating in the intellectual categories that it doesn't deserve to have. And we need to know answers like that, okay? So that's what we're going to do and how we go about it. And I hope and pray that you'll join in and just go on that journey, because I really do think if we'll do this, Christmas will take on a whole new dimension. Now, with that said, that was the opening to the book of Luke. And that's what he says. He says he's carefully investigated. He wants certainty and all that. And he begins, after that paragraph, the journey into the birth of Jesus. It says this: in the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife, Elizabeth, was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Remember that. Now, once when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as priest before God, he was chosen by Lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Okay, now stop right there. There's a number of different things. We said it's about places, it's about people, and it's about encounters with God. So I want to back up a little bit here. And the first thing that Luke does is he gives you kind of a calendar reference for them. Our calendar is all referenced off the birth of Jesus, right? It's 2017 since the birth of Christ. Back then, they would pick a king that was known, and he picks this guy named Herod. And it's important to know about him for historical references from a couple of different angles. Now, it can be confusing because when you read the New Testament, several Herods show up, and they're his relatives. But this is the Herod, the one that was around and reigning whenever Jesus was first born, is known to history as Herod the Great. And the reason he's called the Great, quite honestly, is because apparently he was a brilliant, brilliant man. But on the flip side, he was also a psychopath, okay? A murderous one at that. Here's actually an artistic image of him. They've uncovered, kind of statue kind of looking thing. Remarkable likeness, though. Check this out, see what you think. Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty uncanny right there. So this Herod guy, here's what he does. He's considered brilliant because he did great buildings of things. He's considered a psychopath because he even murdered some of his own sons and other people. And if you've heard the story of Christmas where after Jesus is born, there's a whole town of infants that are killed, Herod is one that ordered that. And what they know about Herod, they're not surprised. They're like, yeah, that's right in line with who Herod would have been, right? So Herod, why he's important, he's not only a calendar reference, but he built this thing called the temple, at least this version of it. And that's very, very important because the whole story set up this guy named Zechariah. He's going to the temple, he's burning incense and all that. But Herod, you'll see this thing called Herod's temple, or the second temple, and there's a lot of reasons for that we don't have time to get into. But what's cool about Herod's temple is, first of all, you need to if you want to understand Jesus' life or the Bible and the New Testament especially, they're going to reference it a lot. And it's very important to understand kind of what it was about and possibly even what it looked like. Now, here's the cool thing, that there was a Jewish historian named Josephus, and we'll reference him more and kind of describe him. He describes this temple so in detail that they've been able to come up with very accurate artistic renderings. They can look at his writings and pretty much build scale models and stuff. Now, here's what you need to know. First of all, that when we're talking about the temple, it sits on the area that we're very familiar with from the news. You look at Jerusalem, you see what's called the Dome of the Rock. The Muslims have built a temple there, and this is roughly the area where the Temple Mount would have been. And that you see that patch of trees kind of in the foreground there, and right by there's a wall, and that's what they know of as the Wailing Wall. And that's a part of this Herod's temple thing. Now, in 70 AD, after Jesus had died and resurrected, the Romans tore this thing down, okay? But Josephus, like I said, gives such a detailed description. Here's what I love, is there's artist renderings, but now we're in the virtual age, right? And there's virtual tours that you can take of this thing. And what I'm going to do is just kind of let you see the temple based upon some pretty good stuff that's been out there. And I'm going to show you one. It's kind of cool. Look at this. This is kind of coming in from, if you were in a helicopter or whatever. And I want you to notice a few things. Number one, the grandeur and the size of the thing, right? And then there's all these crowds everywhere. And the closer that it gets, though, to an internal place, the fewer people have access to it, okay? So that original place is kind of everybody can has access to, but then the focus narrows. And you go into more inner courts. And then up these stairs, and then you go behind this curtain, and that's where our story continued, where this guy named Zechariah walks into this room, and he's going to burn incense on that little thing that's right there by the curtain that it's kind of coming up on, and then right after that, he won't be able to go into that curtain. It stops right there, okay? So that's important to understand about the story, because the rest of what we're going to read all takes place there. And here's what it says. It says this guy named Zechariah, right? It says Zechariah and Elizabeth introduces them. There's a few things you get to know about them. First of all, he's a part of the very small, comparatively speaking, number of people who are allowed to get into that room. This is a very, very, very rare thing. He's part of the tribe that actually gets to do that, and that's what he's done his whole life. He's been a part of the group that gets to get in there. Number two, he and his wife together, it's said, and this is very important, that they're the real deal. They kept the commandments, it says. You know, not everybody's a hypocrite. Some people really believe this stuff. And if you could go back and you can meet Zechariah and Elizabeth, you would meet a couple of people that really did believe it, and they served it well. They did this stuff exactly right. They were from this priestly line, and they did their duties exactly the way they were supposed to do them. They were blameless. And the reason that Luke is pointing this out is the third thing you need to know about them. It says they were also childless. Now, I don't know if you've been through this or not, but I think pretty much nearly every one of us have someone in our lives, or maybe that's you, who's been through the pain of infertility, all the ups, all the downs, all the hurts, all the disillusionments. That's what they went through. You need to know that this is someone who did well, and they're the real thing, but there's hurts involved. Then, picture this temple, picture this guy with his hurts and everything else, and then there comes a day, and notice what it said, that he was chosen by lot, and that's how they would do it. Scholars say that there was like 20,000 priests that were able to even be considered to go inside that place that we showed a while ago. And the way they chose who was going to do it during these different festivals is they would do lots, and we don't know exactly what that looked like, but they would pick it was kind of a lottery kind of system. And I've heard it said that the chances are pretty good that only one time in your entire life would you be selected by lot to do what he did. Because it says he's going into the temple and he's going to burn incense, right? And so what you have is this guy who's this way and once in a lifetime thing. That's it. And it says he's very old. So I want you to picture something. They say the way it went is that two guys went in with him. He's got the incense and stuff, and there's two guys with him. They have to carry stuff for him, and he's kind of walking into this place. And he's been trained, and he kind of knows what's in there, and maybe he's never even seen it before. And he's looking around, and by the way, there's thousands of people outside praying. This is a big, 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 big area. This is a big deal, too. He's walking in, and he's got the honor for the first and only time in his life, walking through there. And then he gets, and it says he's burning incense, right? And then I love what it says in that environment. And by the way, his two friends, once he got to the incense altar, they've left. He's all by himself. And it says in verse 11, then the angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and gripped with fear. Oh, you think? Think about this. This guy's just trembling. He's kind of in there, and he's doing this burning incense, and this is awe-inspiring moment. He's praying. He's doing what he's supposed to do. And then this thing appears here. Now, guys, you would be startled and completely freaked out. If anything at all, it could be a little bunny rabbit. If it were to appear there, you'd be freaked out. But this is an angel, and we don't know what angels look like. All we know is that throughout the Bible, it's very, very consistent. The first thing they always have to say is, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Why? Because apparently there's something about them that's very, very frightening. And he's in there by himself, dang this thing, he's, kind of one of those things. He's startled. He got his attention, right? So he's trembling. He's like, and he listens. And then it says this, but the angel said to him, do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you're to call him John. He'll be a joy and delight to you. And many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He's never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he's born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. Now think about this for a second. He's startled, he's freaking out, he's seeing this thing. But I love the words, and I love the words the angel said because of what this guy's been through. He's very old, so is his wife. They've been through the pain of infertility, all the ups and downs, all the struggles, watching all their friends have babies, watching all their friends because they're very old have grandbabies. And they're lonely. And here's the thing about it. You have to know about that culture. In that time, if you suffered from infertility, that was considered, it's a curse of God is on you. Something's wrong. And that's why Luke stresses so much. No, they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't do anything wrong at all. They're the real thing. They did everything right. But still, God did something different. So he's walked in. Can you imagine just how many times Zechariah would have held his wife in his arms as she wept and she was disappointed yet again? How many prayers they prayed, how much they agonized, because they weren't only just missing a child, but they felt this stare almost from everybody around in their culture, and they're looking around. What do we do? What do we do? That's why it's so cool that the very first thing the angel says after the "do not be afraid" line is, your prayer's been answered. What prayer? I don't think he prayed that recently because he was very old. I think he'd kind of given up, quite honestly. I can't prove it, but I think so, probably. Prayers that he had prayed back when he was in his 30s. Your prayer's been answered. And not only that, your wife's going to have a son. You're going to name him John. And you know what John means? It means the Lord has been gracious. And then here's my favorite part. He tells this little old man, hey, he's going to be a delight to you. I love that. He's going to be a delight to you. In other words, it's not going to be a colicky baby. Matter of fact, did you notice that it said from the time he's in the womb, from the time of his birth, he's going to be filled with the Holy Spirit. You know what the Bible says about what the Spirit produces? Spirit produces love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and self-control. Imagine having a baby come out with that package, you know? I mean, in other words, this baby's going to be an easy keeper. And I see this little couple. Can you imagine just having this beautiful boy that laughs easy, smiles easy, gives them delight in their old age, and the amount of joy that they would have had. And he's stressing that this is going to be a great thing. Actually, Elizabeth says it a little bit later when she finds out and she finally has her baby. She says, God's removed here in my old age. He's removed my disgrace. Now, why is that so important? There's a few things. First of all, there are people that are the real deal. Second of all, we don't know how God's going to do stuff, and that doesn't mean that those who have suffered from those things, maybe in this life later on, it's all going to be okay. Maybe some things aren't going to be okay until the very, very end and we're all resurrected or whatever. But it shows through this Christmas story that God does things in his own story a little bit different than we would prescribe or sometimes we would want. You know, a little bit later, I can't blame him. Zechariah's like, how am I supposed to know this? And he kind of gets tagged off base. He stumbles a little bit. He's this guy, and the angel rebukes him, and you'll read it here in a moment. And we've asked you to read it, so please do. But he can't speak for the whole 9 months of the pregnancy. It's probably a gift to his wife, right? But he stumbles a little bit. It's a real deal. God gives this gracious, wonderful thing of this kid, right? And then he stumbles, but the thing still happens. And that's where the Christmas story begins. The birth of the man known as John the Baptist. With this little couple who've been faithful and solid and awesome, but they've been through pain, one of the hardest things that anybody can go through in life. And yet they showed themselves stumbling, yet delighted at the same time. It's a mystery, and it's wonderful, and it's strange, and it's everything in between. But that's why this stuff is real. Those are real people going through that stuff. And I believe how that applies to all of us is just this thing with walking with God. We're going to stumble. We can be the real deal. We can go through heartache. We can go through all this kind of stuff. But somehow God's story that he's telling, he's going to enfold us into it as we trust him in amazing ways. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back to our campuses here in a moment, and we're just going to create a space of time. We're going to ask you to go back through that passage and look at it and think about it and maybe even pray over it. But I know that through that story, some have been touched by struggles that they're going through in life, things that they don't understand. God, why are you letting this happen? What's up with this kind of stuff? We want to invite you to be able to pray over those things And I would encourage you to have our prayer team or just pray on your own that say, God, during this Christmas season, let me see the real thing. Help me to be real before you and be real to me. Just ask him for that and have him take you through the rest of the season. Let's turn it over to our campuses.